Hello, and welcome to Electrifying Growth, a podcast brought to you by Edison Partners. I'm Chris Sugden, managing partner here at Edison and your host. There are moments in a person or company's journey that are undeniably electric. The spark or sparks, if you will, that propel you or your company to new heights. With Electrifying Growth, we're here to have in-depth, real conversations with great leaders who have been there and done it before. Edison has been investing in high-growth technology companies for more than 35 years, and I have been here at Edison doing this investing piece for more than 20 years. We've led over 225 investments. We understand that it takes great leaders and visionaries to build market leaders. We are your support system, a CEO and management's entourage, if you will. Let's introduce this episode's guest. On our latest episode of Electrifying Growth, I'm really excited to share a second time Steve Raucher, the CEO and founder of a company called RapidDeploy. As you will have read in the press, and you'll see tagged here to this recording, the company successfully completed an acquisition, and a truly successful one at that. We had Steve Raucher on about a year ago. If you didn't see that episode, I highly recommend taking a look at that one. And that was more about all the building, all the things we typically talk about as CEOs and entrepreneurs in electrifying growth. This episode, we talk about the transaction, some interesting things of learning, not so much the things you do differently, but things that may shortcut any of you founders out there and managers who are embarking on your own journey, but even more importantly, maybe considering coming up on an exit, coming up on a transaction. I think you're going to really enjoy the rare opportunity to see a full round trip 1 year ago, the build, and now a year later, a successful outcome. So I'm really pleased to be joined by Steve Raucher, CEO and founder of RapidDeploy. Steve Raucher, welcome back to Electrifying Growth. Thanks for joining me again.
Oh, thanks for coming back. I feel like I'm a regular now.
That's right. That's right. You know, some shows have people their go-to, and this isn't a founder narrative. It's not too often you can actually do a full round trip because frankly, there's too many ideas and new businesses just don't make it. And founders often don't make it all the way to the promised land, even the ones that are successful. And here we are. So the reason I have you back, quite frankly, is a year ago, roughly, we talked about a lot of the challenges of building a business. What was the inspiration for RapidDeploy? Lots of things like that. And here we are, you know, with some recent truly exciting news about the company. I use the term round trip, but the idea that, you know, you had an idea, you got the business going, you had investors, and now you've actually successfully exited the business. And I'll say it this way, everybody's happy rather than getting the details. But all that being said, how does it feel? Is it what you expected? Is it melancholy? Is it exciting?
There's no melancholy because, well, maybe I'll give some context here. So we're just on the other side of a close with a strategic buyer in our market, right? We have a very narrow vertical of public safety in the United States. So there's a handful of real players. And aside from the obvious of why a strategic, which is, you know, strategics typically pay more if they want your technology. But for me, the lack of melancholy is really my entire team and my company are going to a home with the same mission that I have. And all of them are invited. So this is not like I'm going to a private equity play and they're slicing and dicing and squeezing the lemon. This is a company loves my company and wants everybody who built it to come along for the next wave, which for the promises that I've made to people going through the roller coaster of a startup over the last 8.5 years, to be able to keep my word on that part is absolutely huge. To keep my word onto the customers that bet early and high risk and, you know, find a good home for the technology that's not only going to, you know, financially sound base, which is, I'd say, a real step up from a balance sheet perspective than from where I'm coming from, but to truly be able to leverage a bigger strategic player and deliver more value to the customers I already have. I mean, I just feel like a conquering hero. By the way, sidebars, Chris and I always argue over the Stoics, which is, you know, history is written by the conquerors, and I can see how easy for me to write an advice column today as opposed to, 6 months ago. So
you are certainly one of the winners. And to your point, your whole team really, thanks to you, but also thanks to them. Let's double click on that point. Your pride is clear from your look on your face, which is awesome and rightly so. Did you expect that to happen, you know, kind of at the beginning of this dance and this courtship? Think about how that journey happened and kind of what they did and you did to deliver the whole business, if you will, and all of your team members.
I think for any deal to happen, even when there are two willing parties, like in our case, the number of things that have to go right to get to the finish line on a deal, it's extraordinary. We've shared literally thousands and thousands of documents and diligence, all investors to be lined up. You can't imagine how many different things there are to do that. But I will call out that 8.5 years ago, sitting in Cape Town, I told Brett that this particular strategic was going to buy us one day. I've been very conscious of where a good home would eventually be. I haven't been kind of delusional thinking I was going to ring the bell on a listing for quite some time. I won't say ever. After the first few hiccups, I realized that this is not a straight line. Although I still remember walking around trying to raise my first money with a spreadsheet showing how I'd be at $100 million in the next 8 months of ARR.
Best made plans. There's always founder, entrepreneur optimism in all plans. You weren't necessarily building to sell, but you knew kind of what your vision would lead to.
It's interesting. I was listening to a Raval Navikant talking on the All In podcast, I don't know, the last few days. And he was talking about how he observes there's certain founders who are building for the long term. And, my product org, how many times they've asked me to get out of the weeds trying to build something, to scale. I've really wanted to deliver a legacy and fix a problem in the market. And so I guess the quality that we laid down was recognized by an incumbent more than it would be recognized by a financial sponsor, because they understand the vision and our visions happen to align. There's a number of problems we're solving, but the way we've gone about solving this problem with a long-term vision and a stopgap solution with, using edge IoT to bridge legacy and cloud. So we have a very novel way of doing that. And it's got that long-termist view, which is I need to solve for every stage of my customer's life cycle. So I feel kind of rewarded for that, like wanting to only build quality and deliver on the vision. There's so many wrong turns we've made. That's a separate book in itself. Wrong Turns by Steve Raucher. How to do the U-turn when you're in the wrong turn and kind of find your way again is kind of half art, half science.
What's interesting about, for those who don't know the founding story, I'll keep it simple. Tragedy in your life leads to, you want to make the response system to emergencies, I'm just keeping it simple, better.
Yeah.
And a lot better. At the same time, you said, I knew who we were selling it to. That's very commercial. On one hand, you got this very do good. You're like, let's fix a problem that can help people. On the other hand, you're like, I know you as not only an entrepreneur, someone who's very commercial and a trader. And so how did you balance those two things?
Well, I would say they're not mutually exclusive, right? Because I would say that if my business, as in my focus, was trying to court a financial sponsor to put even more stress on my team, not serve the mission, I would say that that had a lot more weight to it. But knowing who actually cared about the problem, as in which strategics truly had a vision for solving this, and not just the will, but really the kind of the force multiplier of both a tech stack and a crazy big balance sheet. I mean, that is a dream for me to be able to take something so far and know it's going to now get accelerated. And if we go back to the story of making the lemonade out of the lemon of losing my brother, knowing that, say, a couple of thousand saves in using our platform, we're going to be 10,000 saves in this time next year.
Amazing. Where the response of the local municipality, government, agency, et cetera, literally says we've seen these videos, and if the audience hasn't, it's worth going to RapidDeploy's site to see it, but literally 10,000 lives that the responders would say, without this system, the person probably doesn't make it.
Stolen valor, I've got to be careful there, but I'd like to say that we are absolutely playing a part in the response. It's actually finding the person first and foremost, and then all the additional situational awareness, which is in the last 18 months, we've had a real focus, not just on situational awareness, but interoperability. And that has the knock-on second and third order effects of both keeping the responders safer and the citizenry safer as well during the response. Like if I don't need an officer to speed to solve a problem, and that can go slowly, that's potentially stopping another accident that could possibly happen. So we're like thinking of these third order kind of effects as well as we're trying to solve this ecosystem. So it's really, really cool to get the scale now. It's just going to be an incredible journey. I'm not going anywhere, by the way, Chris, you should know that. I've doubled down and I've committed to my new home for many years.
Hugely successful together. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's dig a little bit into not so much the wrong turns. And the bottom line is, to your point, we all look a lot smarter when the outcome is really positive than anyone, gives us credit for during the tough journey. And I have plenty of investments that look like that too. So believe me, my day job. Maybe a couple of things that you go, if I had known that was the reaction I was going to get, I might have handled it differently along your journey of maybe not even 8 years, 3 or 4 years. You've taken a couple rounds of capital, you've got investors and operators on your board. Maybe just reflect on one or two things that stick out from that perspective of, here's how I might have tweaked that communication. Here's how I might have handled that situation differently. I don't like to call them regrets. It's just sharing with others a learning opportunity.
Look, I probably said it on my last podcast with you because I love the saying so much, which is experience is the comb that life gives you after you've lost your hair. And to me, that is like the founder's journey is full of those. And in my collection of combs, I would say that there is probably a very good reason why, multiple time founders have a much easier time in raising capital, because the lessons we learn are so brutal. And also, I was thinking about this just 2 days ago. I was with a friend of mine who's an incredibly successful business guy, investor, professional investor. And it's amazing when you hear something from someone who has been in the trenches. And having been in the trenches myself now, I know when to recognize a true pearl of wisdom. At early days, I would just reject pearls of wisdom and believe that I would, forge my own path, and the rules of physics and government didn't apply to me, right? The naivety of the founder is what keeps this magical craziness alive long enough to be real.
That is fair.
It's delude yourself till you make it.
Well, that's why I love doing what I do, because I get to interact with people who just, one, didn't take no for an answer, but wanted to believe they could change the world, so to speak. With a little bit more scale, a little bit more product market fit, as they say, a little bit more there, that these pearls, you're saying you would have maybe listened to, not necessarily at the beginning, but somewhere in the middle. These pearls may have saved you some heartache.
Oh, absolutely. I think.
Or headache.
All of the above. Want to take two. If I think about some of the, early mistakes versus later mistakes, and there's, as I said, plenty of wrong turns. Early on in the process, the market was so enamored with our technology, and I was so enamored with finding a customer who understood us, that I didn't stop, regroup, and try and build slowly. I signed, and almost every other founder I know does the same thing. You go sign some large customers because they look like great wins, help you raise, but you become in like this cycle where you've the dog that caught the bus, and now you've got a new master, right? So being able to go slower, perhaps even in stealth mode longer, would have been a better outcome, I believe, over time, and not burnt as much capital to learn all these lessons. And also, they talk about don't look left and right in a race. I was in a very frothy market. I raised our Series A in the beginning of 2019, December 18, January 2019. And constantly looking left and right, trying to measure myself against who else is raising amongst my cohort. I think that was just very bad for me to do. What I should have been doing is focus on how little can I raise to get to where I need to be. They just raised a monster round, so should I. I need a valuation like that. And, that's very interesting. And you and I spoke about this. Now, having gone through it, now I know the least amount of capital I raise is the win, not the most, which is the first time founder mistake.
The whole tech ecosystem landscape is influenced by it. And there is a badge of honor. Who led my seed? Who led my A? How much was it? What was your valuation? And frankly, this has been a crusade of mine for 25 years. I want the list of venture-backed companies that raised the least and created the biggest top line and biggest EBITDA margin or biggest operating margin, because that means you kept more of your company, but also you did it amazingly efficiently. Having said all that, was it sort of building what you thought was the right thing and the customers were ready to buy? What was that thing that you kind of maybe did that was more money than necessarily it took, if you will?
Well, part of that was the first part of my story, which is, we entered the market with a dispatch product of a complicated ERP for dispatching in 911. And while we had incredibly novel technology, we hadn't worked out all the workflows. I decided to build the plane, as we're taking off or jumping off the cliff. What we should have done is gone slower, built a smaller plane for a smaller customer, and added on to that as we went. And so what actually happened, this crescendo of burn, of spend on one side, customer expectations on the other. And that was just, a hiding that we took and landed up shelving that product. But look, so many of the lessons we learned building that product, we apply to our technology stack today. So I don't call it a total waste as much as a very expensive R&D exercise to get to where we are, which we could have done, I'd say 10x more efficiently had I had more experience where I was trying to get to. And again, I think part of that was I was blinded by looking at my cohort peers, felt pressure from my VC investors to go bigger, faster. I certainly don't want to undermine the reality, which is the later the stage we are, right, we reduce the mortality rate of the portfolios. You're a Series C investor in RapidDeploy, so there should not be a lot of mortality with your companies at Series C level or any company at Series C level. But that does happen. But I think what truly changed our outcome, I'm a fan of Edison, but I've got to put it on the record and just say, having a platform investor that has a partner network, an operating partner network, and your executive director network as well. The words of Al Sabloy rattle around in my head. He sat me down for a 5-minute coffee and I took 2 pills and I left. And I was like, cool. I got what I needed out of that.
Back in the ring, right?
Yeah. Well, but Casey, who helped us completely redefine our go-to-market and our funnel-nomics, as Eric, my CRO, calls it. I mean, without Casey, we would not have fixed our growth engine, which before you guys invested, all the big deals or the wins of RapidDeploy were predicated on me winning a big deal. And then the sales team would just kind of fill in the pockets in the middle.
I call it's the founder sales model. You had to be a superhero. Well, first of all, that's very, very kind of you. And to the audience, I promise I didn't pay Steve to say all those nice things. And neither Casey, we thank you for that. That's really kind. But it's an interesting point you're making. At what point did you start to feel the pressure of the founder sales model? A revenue size, a number of customers? You always knew you needed more than just you, but where did you really feel it? Maybe to the other entrepreneurs out there that are trying to decide when it's time to scale, go to market versus, plug away.
I've thought about this a lot. And this comes back to another lesson I learned actually with you. At no point did I feel I could take my foot off the gas because I felt if I missed a big deal, government, these things move around and they take forever to close. But if I missed a big deal, we would miss a quarter. And therefore I spend my life in airplanes and never going, hang on a second, I'm not traveling this month because I want to write down why we are winning on these larger deals or any deals. So never had a chance to unpack why we are successful. I couldn't memorialize it, therefore I couldn't institutionalize it. And the knock on there was I couldn't train the sales force or even hire the right sales leader because no one's going to follow me around with a briefcase scribbling notes like some kind of Snoopy cartoon, like while I'm trying to run this business. And it was this forcing function of we had a VP of sales who had recently left and your entire team leaned in and came to my office in Maryland. And we sat down and we're like, okay, why are we winning? And kind of broke it down. And that's when we ended up hiring our CRO, Eric, who was then a sales funnel consultant and messaging consultant and helped us fix our sales process and realized that he was the guy we needed to lead our sales force. And he was up to speed on messaging because he wrote it. So it was a blessing. But without that slowdown moment, like recognizing when we should have slowed down, I think I'd still be right now, I'd be calling you from an airport.
So if we sort of look at from a board perspective, there's a lot the board had to do, I'll say it this way, even when we knew we'd had some opportunity. And maybe the roles different board members play at different times. Let's just reflect on the last, 3 or 4 months, again, to an entrepreneur that may be listening that's about to go through this, or they're thinking about selling their company, the different roles people played, whether you leaned on them or needed them, or they had to be governance and it was just more of I hate to say check the box, but maybe just talk about that a little bit too.
One of the things we did, again, both myself and my co-founder, Brett, are first-time founders. And Brett and I both held 2 seats on a board of 7, seats for the common. And we recognized that we needed more experience fighting for the common seats. A friend of mine who is a professional private equity investor agreed, Aaron, thank you.
Aaron Schwartz. Yep.
Yeah, Aaron Schwartz. Agreed to join the board and Brett graciously, put him in his seat. And having an advocate who comes from a governance and a professional investor point of view, fighting in our corner, certainly, there's some pretty rocky times, and being able to have that to rely on, I think, was a large piece of the success. We also have 2 other independent directors. One of them is a legend in our industry. Shout out George Heinrichs. And Joe Kinsella, thank you, is a go-to-market expert as well, Joe. And so we had this kind of very interesting texture on the independent directors, plus myself, who I'm no wilting violet, as you know, and then the lead investors from Series A, B, and C. And I think that gave a really good balance for where I needed to be reined in, or whether, Aaron had to go and fight my corner to make sure that I had enough room to stretch and go and try something and, use a bit more imagination with some things.
I've often said this about investors on boards. You defied my general rule, to be blunt. 1 is plenty, 2's company and 3 is a crowd, but you managed to have 3. There were moments, but all came together in the end for a very successful outcome. But I think what you're reflecting on that I really appreciate, and it is an Edison mantra, the Edison director network that we've kind of continued to try and build, operators outnumbering investors on a board is never a bad thing.
Yeah.
If the investors are concerned about control or not being diluted or, the kind of things around governance, my saying is get it in the deal docs. Don't let the board be able to do something to you that you don't have sort of a say through your security you've invested in, and have the board really help the CEO and the management team scale. And you just touched on that because you had a domain expert, you had sort of an investor perspective without being investor, focused. And then Joe go to market, to your point. I don't know if you did it by design. To some degree you did, but take stock of what you'd like to have around you and use those independent seats wisely.
I'll tell you the interesting thing. I think this was a maturing point for me, is probably 3 years in, when I realized that the board are not there to babysit me. I am not using my board effectively because I'm not calling them for advice and calling them one-on-one. You don't have to have everybody assembled in a cohort to get advice from a board member, right? Like the board member has a natural vested interest in your success by the fact they're on the board. They don't want to be attached to a losing deal. I only realized how I could leverage the individual calls, I'd say halfway through this journey, to be entirely fair. And that was huge for me to actually realize that they were on my side.
You're absolutely right. And early days, not even time of the business, for a long time, when founders haven't been back before to experience that, there is the director's there to assess me. I report to them. The show and tell board meeting is like the worst, right? You think you're performing instead of getting good advice. So that would save folks a lot of time if they looked at their board as leverage and there to help. To your point, and you're saying that's where you lived, right? And it took you some time to get there. One of the CEOs who did really well early in my career, we've stayed very close. He's on a couple of boards now. He likes to say, look, we're here to give you advice. We're here to give you some ideas. You got to decide which advice you think is worth it, which you don't. Then he always follows it up with, but when you don't think our advice were right, we are tracking it. I understand him to say, drop that last part. But the bottom line is, to your point, you're making the call, but they're there to help inform your decision. And a lot of times CEOs feel like they can't make that call to brainstorm. I think you're absolutely right.
Pattern recognition and having the benefit of having operators around the table so you don't have to make the mistakes. We're all guilty of this. We still want to make the mistakes ourselves to make sure they're real, right? We don't want to take people's advice. I think the older I get, I'm approaching my 50th year and my 9th year in the business, the more I don't want to have to make a mistake if I can avoid it, right? You want less and less drama. I'm a risk-taking nature, so I want to go and explore. So how do I balance that without creating drama? And that is by listening to people around the table. And that is
crystallized intelligence, as they say, right? Like use your experience, your favor. You can't just outwork them anymore.
Yeah, but you're exactly right. Like last year, I did the least amount of flights I'd done in the last 6 years. I only flew 112 times. So I still haven't mastered that one, Chris.
We started out by saying, how do you feel? So I heard gratitude, grateful. Yeah. You're proud of what your team has been able to accomplish. From a standpoint of just the involvement of the all-consuming nature of being an entrepreneur, how do you look at that journey? All the things I'm going to say it this way, sacrificed, right?
Yeah. I'd say my family sacrificed, my wife particularly. I would say that for me, my realization is that being an entrepreneur is not for everybody. Like it truly is not. I love it. Like I love all the excitement of the journey. This is an incredibly important statement for me to say because sometimes I find myself trying to encourage friends of mine that aren't suited for this life to go and found a business. knowing I'm almost paying lip service. And some of my friends, I look at them and go, you should be. What are you doing? You have everything you have, you could go and build, but it's absolutely not for everyone.
Take inventory before you go start, right? What do you thrive on? Because uncertainty is the name of the game, and you're going to fail a million times, even along the way, maybe thousands of times. Rewind for one more second on the way you approached the board. I mean, now I'm getting a little more tactical.
Sure.
At the end, so to speak, and I say the end, we knew we wanted to do something. Strategic was the most likely thing. And by the way, I'm going to talk about bankers and board members. Everyone plays a role. And this is not to take shots at anyone. This is not to minimize anyone. It's really to say, I feel strongly bankers run processes and management teams, especially entrepreneurs and CEOs, get the deal done. Is that fair?
I don't know how unusual our circumstance was. I knew I had a clean company after many years of up and down. In fact, I could withstand due diligence, and I know that I was proud of going in. I'd be proud coming out, right? What I felt I had to do to get the board's permission not to run a process, because that was the main challenge in our boardroom, was how do I show my favorite strategic the value that we have created. And I'm a data nerd, so I managed to have meetings, with very senior people and walking them through pivot tables and analysis and help motivate the business case with an open kimono, right? Like to go in and say, look, I believe that this is the best home for my business. In that spirit, show you all the work that I've done. I think that one of the comments was something along the lines of, we always have to guess what the business case looks like, and you're showing us like in a pivot table. And I think that was a defining moment for the success of this deal, because, as I said, no deal goes smoothly, but having belief that there were synergies to unlock, I think helped pave the way for something which I honestly believe is going to be really a great outcome for my customers, the market, like public safety, like the mission I built this business to serve is going to be the ultimate beneficiary of all that pre-work before we even got into a process.
What you just said about business case, I think many growth stage companies and bigger make the assumption that either the investor, the PE firm, or the strategic buyer, they do have all the inputs and their black box is really well informed. What you said was kind of interesting, right? And I think I do remember a board call, maybe it was even a transaction committee call, where we're like, no. You actually have the rare opportunity. I don't want the other board member to take any credit. I think it felt to you like, is this okay to do? The rare case of, we're going to actually walk them through the numbers and make it impossible for them to say no. Talk a bit about having that relationship that you created on the other side, right? To the extent you're comfortable, founders should do that no matter what, to be honest, and CEOs, but it's not always easy.
And this might be true for most vertical industries, and I imagine it is, right? So we're in a vertical industry, public safety, and basically everybody has to play nice in the sandbox. So it's a network, it's a system of systems. I wanted to be in the market the best partner I can to the people that we integrate with. I didn't want to use my integration or partnerships as leverage over the market participants. And as a result, I wanted to be literally a double entendre as the honest broker of both data and mission. And I think that has set us up for people who work with my people at RapidDeploy know that we're honorable, we very technically competent, obviously, but that we want to actually be a net positive to the community that we're busy building in. That actually as the foundation for meeting potential acquirers, knowing that you're not going in there all bolshy or trying to monetize them somehow, but that you have the best intention to work together to create a better outcome for our joint customers. That's the foundation. So yes, I had some really good relationships inside most of the strategics, to be fair, not just the one that lands up acquiring us.
But you were intentional about that.
Very intentional. The beauty of my industry for someone who's trying to find and serve a mission is that because this industry is so hard that I'm in, most people who are stuck around care about the mission too. Otherwise, they would have gone and done something else. So you have this birds of a feather kind of scenario where people who care about each other. because they know we might be competitors, but we're trying to solve a bigger problem. And that altruistic kind of position is a position we took very early on. And we went to the extreme. We didn't want to charge for any integrations. We wanted to, unify the market with a single kind of pane of glass and all that. We've done most of that. But that foundationally meant that I could look someone in the eye across the table, shake their hand, and they knew that my word was good enough because I've been trading on my word for the last 8.5 years.
Right. So as a kind of concluding thought, there's probably a couple of them, so I hate to say one, but the things you'd say to entrepreneurs, but now you're a year out, what should they be doing that they may not have been doing to be ready for this process?
So many stars have to align for you to be in that right moment for a start. It's not a simple, oh, my tech's great, or my sales funnel, my sales and my tech are great, but the market could be tanking or illiquid, like a lot of the later stage companies are finding for an exit. I would say the one thing more than anything that really, really helped us decide to pivot from, oh, we'll run a process in 6 months to actually we're going to lean in, this is the perfect opportunity in the buyer, is the fact that we have been obsessed with documentation from the beginning. So when I wanted to speed up the process, rather than waiting for, a banker to sanitize our information, I was like, I can dump 2,000 documents tomorrow. They go like, what do you mean? It's like, it's all there. Everything's documented. So we took our program managers out of their day jobs and we ran a program office and just moved everything out of Confluence into documentation. And as a show of good faith, gave our buyer 2,000 documents on day one going, this is product engineering. What do you need?
That's a discipline that most entrepreneurs, small companies, free entrepreneurs, they don't have. What was it that informed you need that? Because I think you're right that it was a big difference, and you could just dump the information there and say, go dare through it. What was that caused you to even think that way?
I think we were going very fast in the early stage, and it was very hard. I had to be on every call and every demo, and it was just exhausting. And, apart from being the sales leader for too long, I knew that in order to scale knowledge, we needed to be able to systematically store, process, document, so people could refer, and onboarding would be easier, etc. So all of this knowledge was systematically logged and owned, whether it was on governance, compliance, on infrastructure, on product, on onboarding routines, every single thing, training for our new systems. So we really had an incredible body of knowledge, which, would have taken a year to build from scratch, was just there on the shelf.
So truly the final question to you, because I could see early in the call how proud you are that your whole team is landing and wanted. That's pretty cool. Some people who don't know you may think your ego is bigger than it is, just to be blunt. And I say that we all have big egos, we all have big presence, but I think your management team and the wives on a kind of a fun long weekend trip to celebrate on your dime, I might add. What did you do along the way to make sure people knew you were about the people? I'm not sure I knew it until I joined your board, how important your team was. I'm saying that we know that people are important, but I know how much you care. What did you do along the way to show that, other than this really big thing that you're doing at the end here?
I would say from 2018 to 2021, I wasn't my best self. I was running and gunning so hard and selling not externally, not just externally, but also internally to keep the dream alive while we were struggling with this one product we landed up sunsetting, that I promised myself and my team, we had to go through a major riff in December 21. And the team that stayed behind were in the boat, right? Like 50% were let go. And that was just, the worst week of my life.
Brutal.
I promised I'd come out of the side and show my authentic self to my team and allow myself and them to be vulnerable. And I know this is very soft language, but them knowing that I wasn't selling them anymore and just telling them how it was, how it is, and making sure there were no more silos in the business. Like the management team was read in. There was no kind of, oh, Steve will fill you in a corner with a whisper. Open forum discussions. And it's also quite challenging because the business is based in America and the engineering org largely is based in South Africa. So there's a natural disconnect on time zones, on location. How do you create an esprit de corps across all of this and manage to have failures and be able to report back without all the engineers walking out, right? But it's also an incredibly humbling moment when you realize that you've pared down a larger organization to everybody's rowing. And it gives me great pride to say goodbye to people who want to move on, because I'm not worrying, oh my God, everyone's going to leave because XYZ just left. It's more like, thank you for your 7 years in the company, what you contributed. It's not a jail. Go be free, go do it, and clap them on their way out, rather than trying to sneak them out the back door because you're worried this is a signal that it's a sinking ship. But that's a confidence thing, and it's a mature company thing. And, there's a lot that plays into that. But I'd say if I had to be honest with myself and honest with my leadership style, I stopped selling internally after the riff. And that was a single biggest thing which changed the way people viewed, and kind of anyone who had a question of loyalty either left or they realized I was the real deal at that point.
There's the famous line in A Few Good Men, right? You can't handle the truth. At some point, you realize they had to handle the truth.
I'd say your managers have to handle the truth. Not all the troops can hear how much gets smashed around on a daily basis. And I'd say probably every 6 months, I find myself in an all hands reading Teddy Roosevelt's Man in the Arena speech to the team, just like all charged up, and I want to be covered in blood and dust and with a hoof in my face, because that's how I know that it's real. And if you don't taste defeat, you'll never know how good victory tastes, right? So,
well, that's an excellent way to end, because one, it's a great, I guess you call it a poem. The Man in the Arena is a phenomenal read. It's so awesome to see a company have a vision, execute with all the ups and downs that happen along that journey. I often call our companies these 10-year overnight successes. In this case, this 8 to 9 year. So you've been kind enough twice to share with us on Electrifying Growth your story, and it's so well deserved. Your team did a phenomenal job. You did a phenomenal job. I know it's going to be successful where it's now landed. Thank you truly, and well done. I look forward to toasting in person and hopefully in a few weeks.
Yeah, I would love that. And look, Chris, the same goes to you guys. So my advice to all you founders out there is not all money is equal.
That's, again, really kind of you. Thanks, Steve. Good luck. Talk soon.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you for joining this episode of Electrifying Growth. A special thanks to this week's guest for sharing their time and insight. For more resources, inspiration, and a look inside the Edison Partners Network, sign up for our newsletter at www.edisonpartners.com. Click on the Stay in the Know button in the top right corner of our webpage. Thank you again.